Between Two Dumbbells is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical, fitness, or nutritional advice.
Welcome to Between Two Dumbbells. I'm Skip Hill. I'm bringing 40 years of experience to the table as far as training, and I'm here today with Dr. Marv, a.k.a. the educated meathead. I prefer the educated meathead to Dr. Marv, but I'm sure you prefer Dr. Marv. Anyway, if I was a doctor, I'd probably be called Doctor too. And obviously, you are the brains of the operation here. Typically, I'm the one who posits some thought on either a training exercise, training methodology or something, but we're kind of going to reverse the roles today. And then the other person agrees, disagrees, argues, debates, calls the other one names, that sort of thing, respectfully, of course. But the cool thing is we don't always agree. Today, I think, is going to be one of those days, Dr. Marv. And I may come around. We'll see. Mm-hmm. We'll see. But this is a bonus, I think, too, for the listener or the viewer. Because of that patronizing pat on the back, we're just also smart. So the other thing that I want to add to that I don't want to forget is we're also going to do a follow-up session, and that's going to be something that's going to be kind of routine or consistent with our shows. And the follow-up session will be after the main topic, if you will. And we're going to go back to a past episode. It might be the one we just did the week before. It might be 5 weeks before. And we're going to do kind of a follow-up, and that'll be based on, there may be information that we feel, you know what? We want to add this to that conversation. Or I could have explained this a little bit better because maybe we're getting a lot of questions from the viewers. I mean, imagine the viewership. I mean, I haven't even checked the stats yet, Dr. Marv. I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands already. So when we dig into the comment section, it's going to be a very laborious task to get all these questions and then bring them back. But it will be very, very valuable information, I think, because again, as we were talking pre-show, sometimes we talk about something because, well, we know it like the back of our hand, quite frankly, because we've been doing it for so long. And we make assumptions that the listener or the viewer understands clearly what we're saying when that's not always the case. So I'm going to hand it over to you. What do you posit today?
All right. So I posit that blood flow restriction, aka occlusion training, is grossly underutilized in bodybuilding and grossly misunderstood in bodybuilding.
This one's going to be fun because I'm going to say it's a novelty. It's been around for a long time. See, I'm adding a little bit of attitude to it.
Yeah.
It's been around for a long time. I don't like to do novel stuff. I don't like to drag chains around the gym and bands and wrap everything up. This just seems like an incredibly laborious task. I think people have been getting huge for a long time by going in the gym and banging and grinding. Convince me otherwise.
Very fair. That's, I think, most people's opinion. So let's do a little bit of background about what it is. I've personally been using it since 2010 that we'll talk about, but it was actually created in the late 60s, early 70s by a Japanese bodybuilder. I even wrote his name down, Yoshiaki Sato. He was a bodybuilder and a weightlifting coach, and he realized on his own, hey, if I start putting, a banded cuff around a limb, and training people with that on, people are growing even with lighter loads and getting stronger. Then that happened. He did it. He wrote it in his logbook. Somehow another Japanese researcher stumbled across it and started researching it. It wasn't until the early 2000s where it really started getting researched. I personally learned about it from Dr. Jeremy Lenicky. He's kind of responsible for bringing it out of Japan kind of to the West. And I immediately fell in love with it, used it right away. So I'm using it since 2010. I was just a trainer back then, and I definitely broke my scope, and I was prescribing BFR post-surgery to clients, which thank God nothing bad happened and they didn't throw a blood clot, because I obviously didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So thank God that happened. But BFR, we call it BFR for short, is a pretty awesome tool. I'm going to outline what it does just so people even know what it is. Essentially, you're going to put some sort of a cuff or a band. So you could use anything from cheap knee wraps. The original blood flow restriction cuffs were called Katsu cuffs, put together by the Japanese researchers. They cost $10,000. And then Dr. Jeremy Lenicky came out and said, hey, this was in 2010. Remember that. $10 knee wraps work similarly, right? So there's that. The next step up, or something, just quick release BFR bands or cuffs. I actually have this exact set in my Amazon list. This is what I use my entire training career. But when I opened up, a high-end performance chiropractic office, needed to step my game up a little bit. And so now I am a proponent of these. They kind of look like a blood pressure cuff. These are called H+ cuffs. The H+ stands for hydrogen ions, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's what I personally use myself in an office. Shameless plug, I do have a promo code for this. Dr. Marvin says it is FDA approved. You can use HSA, FSA to get them, but they are pricey. So I would say most of my patients and clients go this route because they're around $30. So what you're going to do is you're going to put cuffs on your limb, so your upper arm, your upper thigh, and you, in a perfect world, you're actually using something called a Doppler ultrasound, where you're measuring the amount of pressure you would put into this, blood pressure style cuff that completely cuts off arterial pressure into the limb. And then you back that pressure off anywhere from 50 to 80%. And that's the amount of pressure you keep when you are doing the exercise protocols. So
let me step in just to, and I apologize for this because I have a couple questions that I think the listeners might be thinking of too. Can you ballpark me? Because obviously, most guys they're not going to run out and buy a Doppler, type of setup. They're going to guess.
Yep.
So how do you gauge that pressure? And let's kind of refer to or contrast the pressure to how it would feel for like a blood pressure cuff length.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Because I'm pretty uncomfortable with blood pressure cuff length. They make me very anxious. I have this weird fear that it's not going to stop. It's just going to continue, and it scares the crap out of me, to be honest with you. And of course, that makes my blood pressure go up. So my readings aren't big. I think it's called white coat syndrome or something like that.
Yeah,
so
I have that.
How do you relate that pressure? And you may have a different way to relate it, but that's what came to mind first was the blood pressure cuff.
Correct. So I'm saying the Doppler ultrasound is like by the book, according to the data, the most evidence-based. Most people aren't going to do that. So then what I recommend is, depending on the width of whatever device you're using, dictates the tightness. So this, knee wraps would be about a 7 out of 10 on a tightness scale. And I will tell you when you've gone too tight. This would be about an 8 out of 10. I don't like going any thinner. They have like 1/4-inch thick ones that I used to use, but research came out saying that could actually damage capillaries because it's just too much pressure. So 7 out of 10 for a 2+ inch thing, 8 out of 10 for anywhere from an inch to an inch and a half would be the tightness. And that's, you're ballparking it. If you've gone too tight, you will know, because if you completely cut off blood supply in, I've only done that once with this style of cuff, you will feel your heartbeat going into the limb. It'll be excruciating pain. You would not be able to override it. Blood flow restriction is very intense. It's not for the faint of heart. A lot of people poo-poo it, have never actually done it. But if you've gone too tight by manually tightening things down, there's no way you'd be able to push through it, and you would literally feel your heartbeat in that limb. You're going to be in excruciating pain. So then you just back off a little bit.
Okay. Another question. Actually, I still have the other one in my brain.
Yep.
I'm going to ask that one first. How is it that this Japanese guy was in the gym training? He thought, you know what? This pump is not good enough. I need, was he just thinking I'm just going to make up? So what would make him, or maybe you don't know the story behind it.
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think about it. What would make me go, you know what? I'm going to choke the hell out of this muscle so I'd be curious. I'm going to have to check on that. I'm curious. And if anybody listening has any background on that, how did this even come up? It's just kind of an odd thing. Now, the other question is more serious, and that is, are there any concerns from a health standpoint? Okay, that's kind of, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. If that's something you were going to discuss, I apologize because my brain's going a mile a minute. Yeah. I'm not, like I said, I've not been a big fan, but I do know that there have been huge advancements in BFR training because of going to Swiss. And I listened to a guy present that did kind of, I was listening. I was not there to listen, but it was sensical. It was making sense. And I remember the guy talking to me next to me said something. I'm like, oh, hold on a second. I didn't want to miss anything. But the health thing is what kind of makes me wonder, much like getting up out of a leg press too quickly. Are there concerns while you're under that resistance, or immediately when you take that resistance off?
Yeah, so it'll have contraindications like most things. So like any sort of cardiovascular disease or order, like if you're on blood thinners, you're not doing BFR. Okay. If you have a clotting history, you're not on BFR. You know, cancer is not like a traditional one, but I don't do anything with cancer because when we talk about how this benefits the body, you would be sending your own local IGF and mechanogrowth factors into the limb. I don't want to do that if somebody has cancer, right? Stuff like that. Anybody with nerve issues like neuropathy where they can't feel their feet, like diabetics, I wouldn't do this on. So there's some contraindications. You can make a really quick Google search, but blood thinners, absolutely not. Clotting history, absolutely not. Uncontrolled blood pressure, absolutely not. I wouldn't do it with somebody with like autoimmune if they have like a flare up of rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, right? So I shouldn't say it's common sense, but if there's any heart concerns whatsoever, absolutely not. If there's any sensation, nerve, inflammatory conditions that are spiked, I would stay away from it. So like what I tell people when I teach them this in office is like, people are going to want to know what you're doing in the gym. And I would strongly discourage from you putting cuffs on somebody else, right? You could tell them what you do, but they're the ones who are going to decide to put the cuffs on themselves just because I don't know how the liability would work, right? But the last thing you want is you don't know what to screen for.
Sure.
This person has this condition. It's a random person at the gym. You're just being a good gym member and helping people out. And then something terrible goes wrong. So I tell your people will ask, tell them what it is, but I wouldn't put it on them.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm going to quit asking questions. You go ahead and run because I got a feeling you got a lot of information. So if there's something comes up, I'll.
So like I said, we're reducing blood supply into the limb, but we're pretty much completely eliminating out of it. So a couple things happened, and that what gives us the proven benefits of it. The main thing is, one, this is half serious, half joke. It will be the biggest pump of your life. So you do your blood flow restriction, you take the cuffs off, you wait 1 minute, and then you take your YouTube thumbnail picture and your arms are the size of your head. So that's a great cheat code for anybody trying to start in the online world. So biggest pump of your life, waste products from muscular contraction, hydrogen ions, hence this is the name H+ cuffs, right? Build up to a naturally high levels. So your body literally thinks there was an injury there. So once you take the cuffs off and restore blood supply, the body freaks out that there was an injury and it sends a huge cascade of hormones into that limb. So IGF-1, mechanogrowth factors, and other stuff. So that's how it could help prove with healing. So that's kind of just a 10,000 square view. In terms of actual benefits, we do know that it can increase muscle growth, similar to heavy loads without taxing your joints or nervous system. Typically, it's derived from the metabolic stress and cell swelling because of, everything's trapped in the limb. So it's going to go to unnaturally high levels. The whole metabolic stress is that a driver of muscle hypertrophy, like Brad Schoenfeld's once thought. That's a little iffy, but BFR is the one case where I go, okay, yeah, that probably is. It will impact type 1 and type 2 fibers. Type 1 is slow twitch. Type 2 is fast twitch, which usually light, and you're only going to use lighter loads, so I will give the protocol in a second, but usually you have to do super heavy loading, explosive movements to activate type 2, but type 2 will get activated with lower loads because what's going to happen is the type 1s are going to fatigue, right? And then the type 2 have to kick in. So it does build muscle growth, but we do think it gets a little bit more muscle growth with type 1, which have less growth potential than type 2, but it is something I still think could help. So directly, it has been shown to increase muscle growth. It'll also been shown to increase strength because it helps something called motor unit recruitment. So again, the environment, the lack of oxygen, the acidic environment from all the waste products building up, the body freaks out. It's not natural response. So it starts to increase motor unit recruitment, and it'll lead to long-term neuromuscular adaptation. So that's how it could help both strength and the mind to muscle connection. Another benefit I really like is it's just super time efficient. It's like pseudo exercise. Like it's mimicking an intense cardio workout if you use it in a certain way I'll talk about in a sec, or heavy loading real quickly. Okay. So I love the fact that it's time efficient. If you can't make it to the gym, I use BFR in the gym to make my workouts harder, which I'll talk about later. You're on vacation. You want a quick pump before a wedding. So you're looking jacked and massive. Like, you could fit it into your day. I also like it for lagging body parts, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. We do know it's great for endurance. A lot more research has come out as of late of the endurance benefits, which I know bodybuilders are going to go, I don't need that. Just stay with me for a second. So it will stimulate like a high intensity aerobic workout. So it literally will trigger something called angiogenesis, which is your body will start creating more blood vessels. So like I personally like when I'm leaner and I'm super vascular, my woman hates it. You want to be even more vascular, you start doing BFR, you will have blood vessels everywhere. Like the perfect example is Paul O'Neill. You know, he had his horrific powerlifting accident. I helped him with some blood flow restriction protocol stuff because he had a double quad tendon rupture on the platform. And he even will say is like, I have like blood vessels over my kneecaps now. Never had that before, right? So it'll do that. It'll help with your lactate threshold, which is great for like very intense workouts. Something really cool though, is one study said that after 6 weeks of interval cardio with BFR, femoral artery, aka the largest artery in your leg, the resting diameter increased, which is wild. So like I'm using it for endurance for my like ultra marathon runners, but think about for bodybuilding, like if you're starting to get more blood vessels, which we're already going to have more from our training, and if somebody's doing the other stuff, this could maximize that to help even further with endurance. So like that could be amazing on leg days.
And not only for the growth benefit, but I'm even thinking, you know, because I'm older, I'm the dinosaur of the podcast here. From a health standpoint, because, you know, the elasticity of our, you know, veins, arteries, that is so vitally important to be able to flex. And so my brain is automatically thinking, if there's any type of narrowing there, would that, of course, they become stiffer and more brittle. But the point is let's say this, you correct me if I'm wrong. I look at it as if there's more elasticity or there is that bigger highway for cars to drive down, then that would be a healthier situation for a longevity, for a health and longevity stand from a, okay. That's kind of what I thought too.
Yeah.
I didn't
so
know
like
blood,
blood pressure will increase during, but resting blood pressure will lower the more you do it. It helps with vascular reactivity, endothelial function. They theorize the diameter of the femoral artery, and that's just one artery. It's going to happen in other arteries too. Like the popliteal artery, they found it. We think it's like the shearing force of it. The body's response to it is to make it handle loading better. So yeah, so there's a lot of good cardiovascular benefits. Again, you have to be healthy enough to do it. But if you can, the cardiovascular system benefits are pretty wild. And we're just scratching the surface of that. Like we really are. Yep. So more research is coming out. I already talked about how it'll, you know, your body will create more IGF-1 or mechano growth factors, which is IGF for muscle. So that'll help repair and recovery. So I'll even have people, if they're training super hard, they do their leg day and then they just put the cuffs on and ride an exercise bike at the end of their workout for 5 to 10 minutes. That'll help facilitate recovery. And then we do know it's nice, especially if you have an injury, because that people most think blood flow restriction is injury, which yes, it is.
That's what I thought too.
Correct.
Even coming into the show, I thought, you know what, from a rehab standpoint, especially when they were talking about it at Swiss, I could see that. I could see that because you can increase the intensity and you can increase blood flow. And anytime, you know, it's kind of like the change from, you know, rice to mice in a sense. You know, we used to think that resting was so great. And then we figured out, oh, movement is so much better than resting because you're still getting that blood flow. And especially when it comes to like I'm thinking of articular cartilage, things that don't have much of a blood supply anyway. That was huge for me with my recovery for my knee. When I started doing those lighter workouts and was careful, I progressed and started recovering or started coming out of that injury a lot faster. Resting, I don't know if I still wouldn't be coming out of that. But anyway, my point being is I could see it more rehab related. But I'm listening intently. The IGF one is the one that kind of, you know, perked me up too. I would not have thought about the cascade of hormones wanting to rush in there. Okay, good stuff. Keep going. You got me.
Yeah. And we do know BFR will reduce pain signaling for 24 hours. So that's super helpful as well, especially if you got, little tweaks in its prep and you still got to keep training. You could do something to help with pain thresholds. Obviously, it's joint friendly, which is super nice. If you've got a cranky elbow, you could still train your arms. And I'll give various ways of how I program BFR, both as pure rehab and office treatment to performance to strength gains. I'll even use it for powerlifters. So we'll talk about that in one sec, but it is incredibly effective without loading your joints or your nervous system. Like think about, super lean on prep the last 4 weeks. That could be a great tool. Yeah. Yep. And then, yes, we've already talked about it, rehab and injury prevention. There is research on ACL reconstruction, just to show you how effective it is. They just do, and I do this protocol in office, cell swelling, where you put the cuffs on the injured leg for 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. You do 3 to 5 rounds. ACL reconstruction surgery heals 30% quicker from that alone. That's mind-blowing, right? So that'll help that. It'll also, even just putting them on and not even doing the exercises will help attenuate muscle loss. So like Paul, right? Like he couldn't do anything. Like you should listen to the podcast he did with Scott on Think Big. It was like an hour masterclass of literally everything you could possibly do, but it could attenuate a ton of muscle wasting and loss that would normally happen, right? So, and it's also helping maintaining in injured areas muscles insulin sensitivity, because we do lose that as you rest. So because it's essentially pseudo exercise, even in that cell swelling protocol, right? Not the lifting protocol or the cardio protocol I will give, but even putting that on is kind of mimicking exercise. So again, yes, that is rehab and injury, but putting those on, I have started experimenting with just putting them on the day after leg days, and I'm recovering quicker. So that's something somebody could do. Now, I don't know if any research has been done on that. This is me saying this makes sense to me. Sure. And I've only, gotten serious about training and eating within the last 2 weeks because I was coming back from injury and I did what we all do, right? And so I'm going to be doing that for a while if anybody else wants to try that. And they've, I should say you should be medically cleared before you do BFR. So let me just do that to CYA. But I'd be curious if other people start doing that, is if they feel like they're recovering quicker as well. So that's kind of like what the history of BFR, very briefly, what it does, its mechanisms, and then I want to share how I use it. We'll start with like just real quick rehab, acute scenarios, but we'll talk about how I use it to make bodybuilding even harder and funner. So obviously in office, if there's an injury, BFR is great. It's a way to load an injured area to help facilitate recovery. I am now combining, and I don't have a video ready, but I don't think people care too much, but I'm doing the cell swelling protocol where I put the BFR cuff on that leg, and then I'm doing my shockwave therapy simultaneously. And it's like 1 + 1 = 17, because shockwave is increasing inflammation in injured tissue, right? So you're already doing that naturally, and then you're using the BFR to tell your body to send all its local growth factors into that limb where you've already stimulated the inflammatory response and damaged tissue. It's like 3 or 4 shockwaves in one. I'll also, from a rehab standpoint, put cuffs on their legs and have them start riding a bike post meniscus surgery or other surgeries once they're cleared to do so. So that's great for as well. So that's like traditional rehab. Let's talk about what everybody wants to know is, how do I use this for bodybuilding? So one, yes, novel. When you use the word novel, I agree. It can be a novel stimulus for hypertrophy, and you could use it in a couple ways. One, if you, just want to like touch up on arms a little bit, you could do one BFR arm session on your leg day. And that's another stimulus of your arms, right? To bring up a lagging body part. I don't think BFR should be used year round. I think it's best in cycles, right? Because it is just another way to add a different type of stimulus. So you could simply do that to touch up on it. You could also do it to help with mind to muscle connection and strength. So if it's a lagging body part, and I've got a couple examples I'll pull up in a second, but if it's a lagging body part, like here is a great young natural amateur bodybuilder. So these are the cuffs we're doing. We already did the Doppler ultrasound. So we're going to put the cuffs on, and he wanted to bring up his biceps in the off season. So what I said is, hey, how about you do blood flow restriction and then train your arms? So this is the only exercise protocol I recommend, is from Dr. Jeremy Lenicky. it is 30% of your 1 rep max. So super light loading, AKA just that light band. You could see the look on his face, and he's cussing and grunting and groaning to get through. So 30% of your 1 rep max. You use 30 reps, 1 second up, 1 second down. We're going after a pump. Slow negatives or eccentrics do not increase blood flow to the pump. You can see how like he's getting mind blown right now already, and that's
it doesn't look like fun. You use the word fun. I don't know if that that might not be the right word.
My version of fun is kind of like John Meadows' version of fun.
Yeah, the results. Yeah. Results are fun.
Yes,
results are fun. Yeah.
So you do 30 reps, 1 second up, 1 second down. Please don't do barbell back squats. Like the whole goal is it is safe, reduced loading, controlled. Then you're going to rest 30 seconds, and then you're going to do 3 rounds of 15 reps in between each. So 30, 15, 15, 15, wait 30 seconds, cuffs off. Okay, so that is the protocol that I recommend for exercise. 30, 15, 15, 15. You could see like he's like tripping out and looking at the pump. So remember how I said it increases motor unit recruitment? You also have a wicked pump. So now he would go train his arms. It's crazy. So you already have a shirt tearing pump. The muscle's super active. So one, I also find I don't need to load things up nearly as heavy.
Yeah, while you're saying that, I'm going to say anybody who wants to get in the comment section and comment on, his arms not being huge. Let me just tell you this. Anybody who makes a comment like that doesn't have huge arms anyway. So don't make the comment.
Yeah. And he's a super young natural guy who has made massive progress.
Exactly.
So that's one way to do it. So here's an example of how I do things. And this is an old video. And I'm a doc. I've never claimed to be a good bodybuilder. So I'm doing BFR. And to make it extra fun, there's that word, I'm using the boxing mitts to increase the stretch in the bottom. Now, I do a full 260 millimeters of mercury, which is incredibly tight on my legs. So that's like the blood pressure cuff. I sit in the stretch position, which makes it even funner. And then I immediately go and do a 1 all-out myo rep set on pendulums.
Oh.
That combo is brutal. 2 movements, your quads are toast. I'll also do what's even worse than this is probably, and then just FYI, loaded stretching right after.
Oh,
so
yeah,
those 3 movements, you do those BFR leg extensions, a myo rep all out set on pendulums, and you're smoked.
Who's that guy? Oh, that's you.
Yep. And then that's
AI. That is so AI.
That's from a magazine article. That's that. And then real quickly, you just put cuffs on and you ride a stationary bike. So that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. A question that came out from these 2 videos. Yep. I thought, because again, I just came into this show. I'm going to be honest. I came into this show very ill prepared because I knew you were going to have so much information, honestly, and I haven't looked into it in quite a while. But there's already some things that have come out and go, I should be looking into this more. Mm-hmm. Here's an example. During the bicep demonstration where he's doing the curls, I noticed that the compression, that the restriction was what looked to be directly over the bicep. Now, when I've seen it in the past, like, because we make shift sometimes, so I thought that the restriction for a bicep curl would be at the top of the bicep, almost between the delt and the bicep, limiting the blood flow down. But that looked like it was pretty much right over the bicep.
Yeah, you just try and get it as high up in your arm as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Gotcha. And he didn't want to go shirtless in the video because it's off season. So those cuffs will come slightly down over a t-shirt.
Gotcha.
Right. So you do your best.
Okay.
Another way I do BFR in the gym, I think this is way worse. One of the worst things you could possibly do, and I'm using the word worse on purpose, you do BFR with deep leg presses. I could think of very few worse things to do. So you do BFR round 30, 15, 15, 15 on a leg press. So I only do 2.5 plates aside, but I'm getting all the way down, hams on calves. You do that, and then you go do your quad movement of the day, you're smoked, right? So that's how I like to use it. So that's for just straight up hypertrophy. I can use it for strength, right? Now, you wouldn't do Dr. Jeremy Lenecke's protocol of 30, 15, 15, 15, because that does fatigue you a bit, right? So when I did, a lot more one-on-one training, if somebody is at a strength plateau, and I've had a couple powerlifters do this on their own, is say you're stuck at like 405 on back squats, like you just can't get past that plateau. I would then have them do, 15, 15, 15 only on the leg press, doing the BFR. They've already warmed up their squats. While they're doing the BFR, I will go sneak a 2.5 or more on each side of the squat. They do that abbreviated BFR. They take the cuffs off. They wait 3 to 5 minutes. Then they go to the back squat. And 99.9% of the time, they will smoke that weight, which is also, remember, we've snuck more weight on there because it helps the motoring recruitment. That strength benefit seems to help more with lower rep stuff, not widowmaker stuff, because you already, think about, you already have so much blood in the muscle, right? And there is hypoxia happening, which is less blood, oxygen available for the muscle. Like that will sap some of your endurance. That's why doing that myo rep set right after is murder, but that also helped my cardio way more than any treadmill walking, right? That combo. Okay. So you can increase strength levels. You're coming back from an injury, right? Obviously, they work really well on vacation, but I use BFR to make my workouts harder, right? On arm day, I will BFR and then I'll do my regular arm day. Loads don't have to go as high. You'll feel an even better contraction. It's already full of blood, so this helps lagging body parts. If somebody can't feel their hamstrings, they do a couple weeks of doing BFR leg curls, and then they start doing their hamstring movement. By week 3, week 4, they're starting to feel them recruit. I did in a story, I've actually switched to where now I'm doing leg curls and then I'm doing blood flow restriction RDLs. So that's been another brutal way to do it, because now it's full of blood when I put a stretch on it. So that's why I'm a big believer in BFR. And then if you're doing it for just recovery, the cell swelling protocols, just put them on your legs and hang out. Or I would recommend riding an exercise bike. Obviously, I'm not the biggest person in the world, but even with my thigh size, I try to wear the cuffs and walk on the treadmill once, and it was Chafe City and then some. So any sort of leg development, you're probably going to want to be using an exercise bike. But for me, when it comes to BFR, I'm smashing on it all day long. I want to hear your smash or pass now, but I think it's something people should try. It's brutal. And I promise, if you do it kind of how I just showed, where you're doing your warm up, you're BFRing a muscle, and then you're doing your normal movements, it opens up a whole nother world of fun or pain and suffering, however you want to view it.
Okay, one more question before I smash or pass.
Mm-hmm.
Are there muscles that you can't use? Because there seems to be that.
Yeah, so it's limbs only. Terrible joke, don't put it on your neck. This is never in total substitution of heavy loading. It's an addition to or an adjunct to, or it's great for even if you're only going to do it on a deload. Have fun with it. It's the biggest pump. But you won't be able to blood flow restrict your chest or your back. So that's when, if I'm having somebody do.
What about delts?
Delts,
underarm, right over the top of the...
In theory, with the quick release, you could kind of put them like this, but you wouldn't be able to do that with the blood pressure cuff style, right? But in theory, I've seen people try to do delts with it like that. I can't say one way or another. To me, I feel like that would be somewhat feasible, but you're going to have to experiment. And if somebody's done that, comment, let us know.
I'd almost think that it would have to be a thinner, and you said to stay away from that thinner compression.
The 1/4 inch thin you don't want, because it will damage capillaries.
Right. And that being under your armpit, if you were trying to do that, I guess what I'm saying is that it sounds like it seems in my head that if I'm going to do, say, side laterals, and the material would almost be too wide and too thick underneath the arm.
Yeah. And then if you don't shave, you got a bunch of nerves there. So if you're your ring finger and your pinky's starting to go numb and tingling, you're putting pressure on your ulnar nerve in the armpit, so you would have to reposition it.
Yeah. I get that from knee sleeves, or front. I say knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, but I use knee sleeves as elbow sleeves.
And then one last caveat, because I forget every few years, calves with this. Every few years, I think it's a good idea when I'm on vacation to BFR calves, and I put them right below the knee, and I do standing on a curb, and then I can't walk for 2 weeks. So if you're going to do calves, I'd recommend still putting them up high on your thighs. For some reason, it's interesting in the gym, I could put the cuffs right below my knee and do a seated calf raise. for the soleus and be fine. But the second I put a loaded stretch on my gastroc with BFR below the knee, you are crippled. So don't do that. Great for hypertrophy, great for soft tissue recovery, right? But just if you want to be able to walk, if you do your calves, you're going to put them up high on your thigh.
Now, you said to only use them for limbs. Would it be incredibly unprofessional for me to ask you to define limb?
Not
we can
the
leave
third
it at
leg.
that because all I wanted was the laugh.
Yeah.
Well, all I wanted was the laugh.
Yeah.
So it's okay. So smash or pass. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm not even going to try to like drag it out. It'd be stupid for me to pass. That's not a pass. It's a clear smash. I still will stand on the fact that it just seems like a pain in the ass, but less so with those cuffs, especially because they're easy to get on and off. My brain was going to, like when we used to try to, and I use the term we loosely because I don't mean me, but as an industry, we used to use what looked like we were going to, I don't want to go down that road and get demonetized. You tie up the arm with a thin resistance band, or tie up the leg with a thin resistance band. That to me seems, and the first thing that pops in my head is I'm too OCD to have one tighter than the other. So with the cuffs you just showed, they look to be, it would be easier to make that pressure even on both sides too. So yeah, I'm thinking again, bis, tris, legs, possibly delts, but yeah, it is limited then to the limbs. It's an absolute, it just has to be a smash. Now I've got to try it. Now I'm just mad. I gotta do more in the gym than I'm already doing. But it just sounds too good to pass up. So it's an obvious smash.
Awesome. So I
don't want it to be, but it's an obvious smash.
Yeah. And again, nothing's going to work for everybody, but every time I've shown it to somebody, you saw the guys look on his face, they're like, what the hell is this? No matter if they're Highland Games, bodybuilders, strongmen, powerlifters, CrossFitters, it's awesome. It's not for the faint of heart. Usually if somebody's doing legs in the office, they're going to do a TRX squat, not just a body weight squat. Because remember, 30% of your run rep max, nobody knows what that is, so you're going light. On vacation, for Thanksgiving, I'll do Bulgarian split squats, body weight only. Holy hell. With the cuffs on, murder. But I think it's a great tool. You're not going to use it year round. It should be used cyclically. It's not in total replacement, but I want to get an extra stimulation to this body part, whether it's your arms or your hamstrings you want to touch on again during the week. Do some BFR leg curls, right? Or making workouts harder.
Just thought of one thing, because it was my knee problem that came out. I don't have knee problems anymore, thankfully. But if this were 4 years ago and I was having my knee problem and I wanted to use it to increase blood flow to the knee, where would I put that pressure? Would it still be at the top of the quad?
Yeah, because it's going to go in the whole leg. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I purposely do BFR because I'm going to need a knee replacement. I was hoping to make it to 50, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I will, it's one of those things where you hear somebody say something, you're like, why the bleep did I not think of that? So I will ride a stationary bike for 1 mile in the middle of my workout. I stole that from you. And then I'll do my BFR movement. Now my knee is so damn full of blood and lubricated, I could get through my squatting motion and I could survive it otherwise. And that's me voodoo flossing my knee, doing all my warm-ups. Sure. It's still an issue. That 2 sequence of, riding the bike for 1 mile, which takes me 4 minutes, and then doing my BFR. Then I go to my hack, my pendulum, my Smith squat, whatever the hell I'm doing. That knee feels pretty damn good.
I will not start my leg training without my ritual of the backward treadmill, the resistance bike, and I have my set amount of, I don't increase the intensity anymore. I just have specific intensity levels that I increase during the time that I do it, and it never fails. One time, Dr. Marv, I did something different. I went and I thought, you know what? It's been a year. I'm going to use knee sleeves again. It didn't take me 3 sets of warming up and starting to build that it started to irritate me. And I literally thought to myself, this hasn't irritated me. It was very minor, mind you, but it was enough because you're so tuned into those past injuries in that area that I'm like, I immediately took it off. Fine, nothing there. Nothing there. I understand someone could be saying it could be psychosomatic. What I believe it is, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because it's not along the BFR line strictly, but it's the gathering of the material behind my knee that leverages my knee in that bottom position when I'm seated in a squat position. I honestly, and I will not, for that to happen again after that long, and even though it was minor, and then take it off and not have that, I will never wrap my knees. And I'm 50, I'm coming up on 55. And my knees are great after they were garbage, to the point where I was told by 2 specialists, you better find something else to do outside of squat. And I did enjoy sending that video to them. It wasn't huge, but 315 and not a ton, 8 to 10 reps, something like, but they were rock solid. And I sent it to both of them. They were just like, good, call me. What did you do? So it was.
I hate
very,
providers who do that. That's my biggest pet peeve.
I did too, but I will say this. I almost needed it, because what it did was it made me, when I left the office, I thought, and it was the second time, I thought, you know what? I know too much. I think I'm going to figure this out. I think I can figure this out. Now, it took a long time, but the point is, it doesn't even really matter how long it took when I thought I was done. Yeah. So for my knees to be in the condition they are now, coming up on 55, and it's not even the age, it's the training years are like dog years. Yep. I've trained for 41 years. Even when you do that right, those repetitions, even with correct mechanics, it degenerates. It's degenerative in and of itself. It's just repetitive, repetitious motion. So now, I mean, I have a lot of extra years in there, but nonetheless, I'm good right now. So do we want to take this opportunity then to transition to the follow-up?
Yeah, real quick before we do that, I have one minor correction. Because I know somebody's going to watch the video and they're saying, oh, Dr. Moore, blah, blah, blah. So just so we're on the same page, because I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought. If your arm is forward and I'm rotating this way, that is still externally rotating the shoulder. I just quickly said internal for the sake of the conversation, but somebody's going to say that. So how do you know which that's doing is it's based on what's called anatomical position, which is you are standing, but your palms are forward. So that's the position. So when I'm standing, my palm is forward, right? That's anatomical position. And then are you rotating towards the midline, which is internal? Are you rotating away from the midline, which is external? Hence, in this position, that's an external rotation. So just so biomechanics people don't say I'm a complete idiot, right?
Yeah. Well, say
call me an idiot for something else.
Yeah, there's always that one or two people out there.
But I wanted to bring up, and then like Skip said in the beginning, because this is episode 3, we're recording it. We launch it officially tomorrow. We're going to start going back through the comments and bringing up your comments or your questions. But for now, Skip and I are going to bring back the back thickness versus back width topic, because, I guess we'd call it older school, bodybuilders, is you have your back width movements and your back thickness movements. I have my own personal opinion. I think it is simplified and okay, and I generally understand the concept of what folks are going with that, but it's probably not that cut and dry, right? There's 50 shades of this stuff. So I would like to hear what you think before I go down, since I pretty much led off the show with BFR.
But one of the things I've said for a long time is a muscle doesn't grow in one direction. Mm-hmm. So, and another thing that stands out off the top of my head is I'm already very, very narrow shouldered. My clavicles are not wide. So I fight for back size, back width, even shoulder width as well, much more than the average person. So I always struggled with that, kept thinking in the early days. Remember, I've been around for a long time, so I started training in the 80s. That width versus thickness, I got to do more chins. I got to do this. I got to do more lat work. I got to do more lat work. And we touched on, that, or actually covered it quite well during the back session. It's not as much about the lats as it is smaller muscles around, teres major, things like that, around the scapula, and the ability to open those scapula as well, which is largely the genetic component. There are things that can manipulate it, but there's still a pretty big genetic component there. One of the things that I found was when I threw those rules out of the width versus thickness and started rowing more, all of a sudden my back got wider. And it didn't necessarily just start going wider. It just grew more, and it didn't grow in one direction. It grew in, in a 3D way, and you just get wider. So you want a wider chest, you're not going to do specific wide pec exercises, you're going to get, or inner is even a good example, because we get that question a lot. Well, what about the inner pecs? Just grow more pec muscle, grow more tissue, and everything fills in. You're just thin there because your pecs aren't very big. And I think it has a lot to do with, it's a similar situation or similar scenario with any muscle group. I was going to say with back musculature, but because the back musculature is so complicated and there are so many muscles, there's just, and arguably there's potential for more growth when there's more muscles in the area. So yeah, I don't subscribe to that with thickness. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, I get what they're saying, because they're calling vertical pulling motions back width, which, yeah, sure, because usually a lot of people think any overhead pulling motion is lat dominant, but really elbow position still matters. So we do know, again, surface EMG has its limitations, but a traditional wide grip lat pull down or pull up, the lat really takes over once your arm's below 90 degrees. From here to here, it's still largely upper back. And then back thickness is usually your bent over rows or something like that. So yes, you're getting erectors, but you could still hit a lat with a row, especially if you lean your torso slightly forward. You're pulling your elbow down to your hip versus being flared out. So I get the concept of it. I like having both vertical pulling and rowing in somebody's program. I probably do a little bit more rowing than vertical pulling.
I do as well.
And yeah, because think about, most rowing motion is more upper back dominant unless you're specifically doing lat focused stuff.
Right.
But you're getting your erector. I mean, even a seated cable row, your erectors are working overtime to stabilize. People think you have to be doing a free barbell or dumbbell row. Like even in a seated cable without a chest support, your erectors still have to stabilize you. So I think I get where they're coming from, but I think it's a little simplified. But yeah, I think most people will say they do more rowing versus vertical pulling. I think that's pretty standard across the board.
Yeah, I agree. Not only with myself, but even programming for a lot of my clients' training as well. I know, speaking for my own training, even with my limited back width, I'd have to, I'm running it over my head. I'm probably 70%, if not 80%, rowing.
Do you typically do a vertical pull first to kind of like open up the back?
I do, but it's not what I don't like, and I'm not a fan of, is a lot of overhead pulleys, especially for lat pull downs, I don't think are mechanically correct. They're too far, arguably almost behind you. I would rather, if you look straight up, I don't even like straight up above you. I like it slightly forward. I don't like that. And a lot of them will not only be above you, but they're slightly behind. So I have to move out as far as I can, almost hanging my glutes, if you will, off the back side. I pulled up a bench behind it before so that I can get more of my ass away from that, to have that pulley out in front of me. So a lot of times I'll open with a standing lat pull so that it's almost the angle of the, the hammer strength, the one that is so popular, that comes from kind of like a 45 or maybe a 60-degree angle. Yeah. I think that angle for me, with my narrow clavicles and the way everything is set up for me with my body, that's going to give me more lat involvement than trying to pull something down vertically straight over my head. It just doesn't activate the lats as much. And I want to add this before I forget. I'm going to posit as well that a lot of the bigger guys, and when I say bigger guys, I'm talking about, your 240 or 250 or 230 in there, who are doing lat pulls very heavy, arguably even chins, but a lot of guys who are that big don't do chins. If you're not finishing those lat exercises, you're going to have a hard time increasing the development of the lats. And part of that is you have to back off on that weight to be able to do what I call finishing the reps. They need to be finished. The top 2/3 or the top 3/4 of that stretch position is not going to engage the lat enough, in my opinion, where on, say, like a dumbbell press, it's arguably good to keep that, 2/3, 3/4 of the bottom movement without locking out at the top.
Yep.
But that is not the case when you're training back. And I would even say with the rowing as well, even though that's not lat based, but if you're not getting enough protraction, enough movement in between the scapula, I don't see a huge benefit from pulling too much weight. If there's any muscle group, I think that you could back off on weight, or people train too heavy and limit their range of motion, it's on pulling and rowing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Strongly believe. That's why I've said for years that if I walk in, I could walk into any gym, not only in this country, but arguably any place on the planet probably. And whether someone has good back development or not, I would say that 60 to 70% of those people in there, maybe even higher, are not training their back as efficiently, as optimally as possible.
Oh, I would say 90.
Yeah, it could be. Could
So
be higher.
now, yeah, like shoulder blade retraction, protraction is most important for upper back. Lat, not as much, just because 20% of people's lats don't even attach to their shoulder blade. But it still is the elbow positioning wide. If you want to do quote unquote like a real lat pull down, this is from Joe Bennett, is this guy, right? So that's a real lat pull down biomechanically, right? It's exactly what you talked about. The cable's in front of you.
Yeah.
You're mimicking the Arsenal. Elbows are by your side. We know your active range of your lat is about 120 degrees of shoulder flexion, which John is getting here. The elbows by your side. Like that would be technically biomechanically a better lat pull down that I know Joe Bennett put out, and it blew up.
Yeah, as it should.
Yeah. And that's a awesome movement.
Yeah, I like when people put out information. There's so much information out there. I always refer to it as the giant sea of turds. There's so much information that is not good. It's not necessarily bad, but then there's a very limited amount of information that is really, really good. And I think it would suck not knowing where to find that information. Who would know? You got to know Joe Bennett knows his shit to be able to know that information is rock solid. That's good stuff in a giant sea of turds.
Yep. So yeah, and on a secondary tangent, I am not a fan of the whole 20 pounds on the cable, you're kneeling, doing a super slow side bending.
Sure.
I'm like, where's the mechanical tension?
Yeah.
Like, I know it feels hard because you're fully shortening, because the lats do require a little bit of that side trunk or torso side bending because it does act on the spine. But I don't see any really massive people on the ground. It's
always I hate to make blanket statements. I don't like people who speak in absolutes. My kids will tell you, my wife will tell you, I don't like to use ever, never, that sort of thing. You can't do that. It's not a good idea. So I'll say this. It's frustrating to see, as an observation while I'm in the gym, that the vast majority of people who are doing those movements are very thin, newbie trainers who they saw it on the internet and this is the way to do. Now, the one thing that I think is good about it is this. It will teach them how to feel the lat, because they probably aren't going to feel in such a complex musculature with the back as a newbie. If they go in, they just start doing lat pulls and chins. Typically when we start, we come up with the mechanics, or we develop the mechanics that get us from point A to point B as many times as possible. It's not about that connection between, with the muscle and that sort of thing, in the stretch and squeeze, because you can't, that's not a level that you can understand. That's being 17 years old, driving a car for a year, and then thinking you can get into a Formula One car and be effective and know how to do that and understand the mechanics around doing that. You can't do that. So that might be the one benefit. I still think it's frustrating, because while that might be a benefit for them, I train in a small gym. They're in my way. Go do that. Go do that somewhere else. I don't say anything. I'm not like that. But
they're getting out a sniper rifle or a scalpel, and they've never used a shotgun or a hacksaw. Like, so that could be your finisher after your meat and potatoes traditional lifting.
Sure.
But yeah, when I get tagged in those videos, I'm like, man, that's not what I'm trying to tell people. But to each their own. Like, if you enjoy doing it, training should be enjoyable. So great.
Mind if I take us out?
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We want to hear your feedback. If you have a topic that you think would be a good idea or that we may be interested that you want us to cover, we want to hear about it. Finding the material, it's relatively easy to do because we're just starting, but sometimes when we hear a topic from somebody, we go, that's a really good topic. If you have further questions about the current topics that we discussed today, let us know, obviously, in the comment section, because we will come back and do a follow-up if there's a lot of interest, or if the questions kind of make us feel like, okay, we should have covered this part just a little bit better. Check out True Nutrition, of course, to get your Team Skip blend. Got to get that in there. Use the discount code SKIP. There is a reason that other top contest prep guys, other than myself, have their clients use my protein for years. Reach out to Dr. Marv on IG at The Educated Meathead, correct?
Yeah, so it's the Educated Meathead _com, or the one I'm most active on is my personal at dr.marvin.saysdc. I had to think about it for a sec.
Can they find all that at theeducatedmeathead.com?
Yeah, and then my website's
cool.
educatedmeathead.com to have all my promo codes I put out. I think I have like 8 promo codes of products I personally use and trust. Use Skip's code, but I have personally used Team Skip for 8 years.
Nice.
Yep. So,
and you weren't even paid for that.
There.
You weren't even paid to say that.
Nope.
I appreciate that. No bias there at all. You can reach out to me for any type of online training. Obviously, I've been online training for over 20 years, 24 years now. I'm kind of the OG. I'm from the message boards, that sort of thing. I know a thing or two. If you're interested in following me on Instagram, it's at Intense Muscle. You can always reach out to me there as well. We said today was a smash. We disagreed a little bit, but we haven't come up with something where we butted heads yet. So we're going to have to come up with a topic where we just butt heads and we go, you know what? I just don't think you're right.
I think it's going to be leg curls and RDLs.
Could be. It may well be.
That's the one. I think that's the one.
On that note, check us out next week for our next episode. We don't know the topic yet, and we're going to be dropping every Tuesday, every week, every Tuesday with a new show. Check us out.